Before we get started, let me just reintroduce you to who we are at Client Success. You might know us for our involvement in the community, our thought leadership, our conference, the CS100, but we are also a customer success platform to help you manage from new to renew. We know that's a critical stage in your business as people are looking to grow their most important asset, which is the existing customer base. Folks use Client Success to help them better manage and get insights into those customers. And that is exactly what we do. So if you have questions or if there's a need in your business, certainly we would love to talk with you. Do reach out and we would love to be in touch. So let me introduce Whitney really quickly, and she can introduce herself throughout her presentation. We'll be talking on a performant renewal strategy today. And we do have another session this Thursday with the team from Closed, who will also be talking about kind of a win-loss analysis perspective on renewals. And so we're looking forward to Whitney's content today. This has been part of our CS100 live replay series. So if you head over to our website, you can see some other speakers. So without further ado, Whitney, I will unshare my screen here and hand it over to you, and we'll get started.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave. Okay, I'm going to share my screen, make sure that you can see it.
Yep, got it.
Perfect. Okay. Well, thanks again, Dave, and a pleasure to be speaking with each and every one of you today. I continue to be deeply involved in the industry of things, and we'll talk a little bit more about, as we go along, sort of like why you even care what I say, meaning what has my experience been like, and I mean this in the most humble way, but like I believe fully that I'm probably have seen and done more renewals than most people in the industry. And so what does that mean? That means I've seen the good, the bad, the ugly. That means I've made mistakes along the way. That means I've had some great successes along the way, which what I want you all to take from that is that if and ever you have questions about, building out renewal engagements, teams, what we're focusing on today is renewal management and execution and how that goes. But I also have built out CS teams, and you know how all that comes together. I probably don't need to talk about that. But with that being said, so what you guys will, if you don't know me, and none of you do, what you will start to learn is that pretty much everything that I do is centered, and like it'll be a soapbox I always start with, which is nothing that I'm going to say to you guys today matters if you're not investing in the people that are on your team making you successful. I am 100% sure that it should be people first, and then always purpose centered. And so I'm always motivated by the mission. I really make it a big deal in my teams as I'm growing, scaling them. And I've had the pleasure of building some of the biggest ones out there and the most successful, that they have a very clear mission, that they're all united by their values, and that we're very proud of our reputation, meaning how we do business, how we work with our cross-functional peers. Like these things, if not done, again, everything I'm going to share past this doesn't matter. The performance comes naturally when the people are treated as if they are the prize, and they are. So employee experience feeds customer experience. I'm very clear on this. A little bit about me. You'll see a picture here. This is, gosh, it's been 3 months now, but went out to Africa, climbed Kilimanjaro. So one of the things I try to do from a people-centered perspective is continue to live my life with purpose, so that I can show my team that you got to go out there and do big, scary things. And some of that for me is climbing, mountains and other activities. So a lot to me from a human aspect, besides the fact that I know how to get deals done and build teams. But I always take a point to stop here and say that if you're not thinking first about how to motivate your teams and people, then you're going to fall flat on your face. And I can remember earlier on in my career when I kind of didn't know that. So all that being said, we will get into the meat of it. And I have built, and this will not be relevant to all of you, but I can tell you that if you're in build mode, or you're in modes that will talk about that this is a model that I firmly believe in, but it really becomes something that you adopt over time and when your organization is ready. So as you're a smaller company, you will not have distinct roles doing all of these things for you. But as you start to scale your company, as you acquire multiple companies, as you become a multi-pronged product company, as you start to get numbers and numbers of renewal transactions, you will very quickly understand and realize that you need to start to specialize your roles so that everybody can come to work and do what you need them to do in your company. So Renewals is absolutely a team sport, but there's something that this model is something I've done a few times. I haven't started here always. And if you guys have any questions about where to start, when you should start to apply different models, it's naturally going to start to feel like that in your organization. If you start to understand that your sellers are spending way too much, maybe all you have is AEs or AMs in your organization, and they're doing sort of taking care of the customer, and they're also doing the renewal, and they also have a quota on their head. At some point, they will say, I can't hit my quota because I'm doing all of these other things. And then you will potentially start to talk about, if you haven't already, engaging or instituting a customer success manager of some sort. And that person might then play the great post-sale role, and they might also do the renewals. And then over time, as you continue to get bigger, that CSM, who should be spending 80+% of their time really focused on the customer outcomes and value realization, will say, I don't have any time because I'm always negotiating renewals. I have 50 this quarter. I'm stuck in negotiation land. So these things will start to unravel themselves, but I call this the trifecta of success. When you get large enough and when you're able to do it, when you have the AE or AM, CSM, and RM working as a trifecta within the account, it is the most powerful and biggest deals that I've seen, and healthiest customers, longest term renewals, best commercial deals come from this structure.
Whitney, I'll dive in real
Okay.
quick just to kind of get the juices flowing to see how people. I spun up a poll which you saw asking people if they have a renewal specific role in their org. So far, 3 out of 4, 75% are saying no. So this, I'm sure a lot of your where to start will be interesting today. So yeah, just interesting so far.
Yeah, thanks for the context there, Dave. So yeah, so as you guys, so I am very clear that it not always, so like it's timing is everything, and your organization has to be ready. But if you are growing as a company, then this is the model you will want to move to over time when it makes the most sense. And that's literally because you're otherwise going to have roles defocused in places that don't allow them to come to work and do what they need to do for the company. So with that being said, for some of you that may not know, before I was at Netwrix, which I came to about a year ago to start to build their organization up, I was at SAP. There I founded their renewals organization and customer experience function within SAP. By the time that we left, I had about 350 people on the team. We had $2.5 billion in revenue under management, and we were doing about 60,000 renewals a year. So that's credibility, I guess. And my like, why should you listen to me? I've been there when it was 1,000 deals to all of a sudden when it was 60,000. And so I like I said, I've seen and done it all. And it's a slight humble brag because, like I said, my teams were the first class teams that made me successful, but I have been there from working in some of the largest tech companies in the world to now working in a cybersecurity on-prem / cloud environment. Like I've seen it all. So we can have a good conversation around all of that. All right. So a couple of things, no matter what or where you're at relative to like, despite what we just talked about, which is personas that enable your process, there are measurements that you absolutely need at your within your company to ensure that you have a high performing renewal engine. And again, this is role agnostic. So I don't care if your AM or your CSM or your RM is doing it. These are metrics that any company should be looking at relative to making sure that they are driving a good renewal function. So, I mean, most of you are going to know this. These are kind of table stakes, but it's important, you know, from our perspective, we measure ourselves on the net renewal rate, which is, you know, just your renewal base plus upsell and uplift. Your gross renewal rate, very, very important that you measure both. Your gross renewal rate is going to give you a much better indication of how your customers are performing, and you're not going to hide that with new business in any way. You should get very good, especially in the economy that we're in, at understanding when and how good you are at applying price uplift in your renewals. This is a strategy that's near and dear to me, and probably one that can make you very powerful and popular with your CFO, your board. If you're in private equity, your investors, they care about this. Your ability to speak to how you're improving it and what you're doing is extremely important here. And if you don't have a strategy, you need to get one now. And I spent a lot of time here, and I'm happy to talk about it at any time. We'll talk a little bit more about it later on here, but you need to measure this. You need to measure it distinctly, and you need to be able to measure it outside of GRR or NRR, right? You need to be able to say, this is how much we got in price increase. Multi-year rates, very important as well right now, right? You need to drive longer term contracts versus 1-year contracts. Ability to reduce exposure of churn over time is very important. And then finally, your linearity rate. So this is simply, if you had 100 deals in the quarter, are you getting them done on time every time, right? This is a really good measure so that you can understand, are you preventing revenue flow, right? Like, are you getting cash in the door in the way that your CFO expects you to? Having late renewals is not a popular place to be. And if you're not focusing on it, and I can tell you a lot of companies haven't in the past, you need to, and you want to have a near 99% linearity rate in the quarter. Again, this is, if you're doing that, right? If you have this is the first indicator of a broken engine. So if your linearity rate is poor, then you have a problem, and you just need to start measuring it so that you can change the overall outcome. A couple things for you to, as you're measuring the business, just make sure that you set up your data framework in a way that you can measure your results by region, industry, segment, and partner. You're going to want to be able to give good churn analysis and win analysis in these ways, right? Again, setting yourself up for success to be able to steer the company, right? So if you're taking more churn in EMEA versus North America, you need to know that. If you're taking more churn in the channel versus direct customers, you need to know that. You need to know where your leaks are, and you need to set up your framework from the beginning. And then most importantly, and I put a quote at the bottom, something that's becoming very, very relevant is understanding your performance by ACV. So this is to be different than how we say customers, like our enterprise customer, they spend 750 million and above. I'm not talking about segment. I'm talking about your customer banding. So if they spend between 0 and 5K with you, 5K and 10K, how are they performing in those bands? So this is a very good and very, very critical measure, more than any other, to start to understand sort of in many cases, your ideal customer profile. It starts to feed the sales cycle. It lets you know, like, who cares if you're bringing in $100,000 sales deals, but your renewal rate on those is 0, but your renewal rate on your 0 to 25K customer is 100%. It's just very important to understand, like, how you're doing there. So independent of the roles that you have, understanding your North Star measures are incredibly important. If you don't have them, and these are not all of them, but I have found that these are, right, you want to keep it pretty simple. You want to repeatedly report out. These are going to be the ones that help you get to where you need to go. Okay. I always like to give examples. We did this at CS100 Live. So comp plans are always an interesting component when I'm talking about renewal management. And so I put this out here just to show a basic compensation structure to motivate the team, which in many cases, renewal managers or sometimes CSMs have, their base plus their variable. And the 3 MBOs that I believe have driven the best results in the businesses that I've created. And this is, I'm always challenging myself on this, and always a good conversation to have, but it is net retention, right? Don't pay attention to the weighting. The weighting matters depending on where you're at. If you've never measured net retention, or you don't really know if your company can, then your ability, you might weight it lower in the beginning, so you just don't really get your, but ultimately and typically as you're more mature, you would want the weight to be much higher on net retention. But again, you're just setting MBO. I usually have 3 MBOs. I usually I have them mixed in terms of team-based or individual-based, and they're normally around net retention, the linearity rate, and ultimate data hygiene. That sounds very boring, but everything that everyone's putting into the CRM in terms of risk management, forecasting, our ability to see and understand what happens. We need people to care about what they're putting into the system, so that as we report out, we feel good about that. I have learned that by not putting that in a comp plan, people don't care. And so, or they just don't pay attention to it with the rigor you want them to. And I run my entire business off data, as many of us should. And if you have bad data, or you're getting bad data outputs, then you're going to look silly in front of your board or whoever you need to present to. So just wanted to show that there. Oh, did not mean to do that. All right, this is just an actual example. We don't have to go with that. All right. I'm kind of zooming through this, so this is gonna go
This
fast,
is great.
but
Yeah, no, this is great. We appreciate it. I put up another poll. Just interested if the audience is tracking NRR by CSM book of business, and we're about half and half. So I think there will be some good content for those who aren't, to kind of help them get started.
cool. So I talked about the kind of the values of, a people-based, performance-based, and process-oriented model, right? So as I've been building teams up over time and organizations, there are some things that I believe are critical and relevant that I wish in some cases I didn't know until later, right? But so these are all things that you can put in place as you start to build out the team, that make it a lot easier if you than if you do it at onset. But if that's okay, if you didn't do it at onset, it's something you need to think about getting done. So within a high volume renewal business, setting a renewal motion that defines your level of engagement is incredibly important, right? So the larger you get, you will be constantly asked to be operationally efficient and operationally excellent. You're going to need to make sure that you have an understanding of not every customer gets the same exact execution model. So the way that I've done it in the past is it very, 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 like I put in here some of what it is, but the basics are, you want to have your strategic renewal customers, and you want to look at it from 60 to 80% of your up for renewal revenue should be in this bucket. So your high touch, it's like a high touch renewal experience, a very proactive high touch renewal experience with that customer. And you want that to cover enough revenue that you can be confident that you have a handle on that, and that your renewal rates and your, anything that you're reporting you will feel confident that you can hit those targets because you're covering your most strategic customers. And then a slightly lesser middle ground, right? So depending on your business, you may or may not have like a volume space. Where I am, there is a volume motion and an auto motion. So it is a roughly 20 to 40% of the revenue sits in the volume space. And then there's an auto renew motion, which is customers who auto renew. And we'll talk about that in a second. But these are literal customers that you do not go and have an engagement with every single year or quarter. They just auto renew. If they need to make changes, they can, but you've got to set your renewal motion up front to be successful from a scale perspective. And those motions then drive your ratios. So as you build out your team, you'll understand like those who are covering strategic deals need to have less deals because these are typically the larger, heavier negotiations. Although I'm also very clear that a $5,000 renewal can be the hardest thing to get done, and sometimes the $1 million renewals just come in, which is crazy. But the point being, the folks that are focusing on strategic, you want them to have a lesser portfolio. This is where all your revenue is sitting. You need to make sure it's quality over quantity. They can't just process deals and not really adhere to the commercial tactics that they need to, which is repricing as there's downsell, commercial churn mitigation, uplift, raising the customer's price, all of those things. So they need a portfolio they can manage and be very good at. Volume, the motion dictates then that the volume ratio, you'll have more deals and then your auto, you would never have a ratio for that. But ultimately you should aspire to auto renew 20% of your bottom revenue. Like by nature or by definition, this is what you would like. That could mean 100 deals or 2,000 deals for you, but you want 80% of your revenue to be covered by someone who's engaging proactively, and you want 20% of your revenue to flow through the auto engine. And as you grow, if you might acquire companies, if you bring on a big company that has 5,000 renewals and they're all $1,000 each, you're going to have set yourself up for success because you will eventually move them into that model of auto renew.
Whitney, can I
Yeah.
dive in and ask a question here? There's so much about the auto renewal process. For one, it might need to be product enabled. It might need to be really simple. But to your point, sometimes those larger strategics might prefer an auto renewal. They might not want that huge QBR. They might not want 7 meetings leading up to a contract. Have you seen auto creep up into more strategic, and would you advise that, or what have you seen there?
Yeah. So the next point kind of goes into that from a T&C flexibility standpoint. So if you can influence your terms and conditions of your contract, I am very adamant and firm like that every contract, no matter what size, should have auto renew terms and conditions. And it is a condition that I very rarely will approve a new business. It has to come in my business. It has to come to me if they want to turn it off. Because this is honestly not, first of all, it's not going to kill a new business deal if you say, no, we're not turning off auto renew language, but it does break your scale. And I want that in there because, to your point, Dave, any customer that tells me I don't want to do this procurement thing, just send me an invoice. Fantastic. Got it. Right now, we don't want that to be the approach. First things first in our strategic space, because we'd like the multi-year deal. Typically auto renews 12 months, but everyone should have the option. That doesn't mean that it's our first pass that we would like, right? But everyone should have the option. So it's a great point. And you want to enable that by making sure that auto renew terms and conditions are in your contract, your standard MSA, EULA, whatever you want to call it. And you want to be diligent about sales not negotiating it out, right? It's one of the things that it's every time they do it, they're breaking your scale. And every time they do it, it's difficult to keep track of. Even the best people, like processes in the world, miss these like non-standard terms and conditions in customer contracts. You just don't want it. Like you just don't want it. So, and then also, what I typically do, I give everyone this advice. Most customers will come and say, take auto renew out of my contract. And then we'll go back and say no. And in fact, customer, I'm looking at, your contracts and like, imagine if they're Netflix. You guys use auto renew on your customers every day and you don't turn it off. Neither do we. Thank you very much. Right? Like, it's just, if you want to terminate, you just have to terminate. So it's very important to keep operational rigor around this stuff, because it does break scale. The other thing around terms and conditions that you should work to influence or change if it's not there is flexible price increase language. So I've been part of companies who do 5%, or they might say CPI or whatever, right? The best one out there just says we have the ability to increase your price. That's it. which is the best for you as a business leader to, if you think about the last couple of years, especially, right? Like it having that, not dictating a percentage or even CPI, allows you to adjust with the market as the market demands it. So I have a, you know, a steerco. We come together about right now every quarter because the economy demands it, but about every 6 months to say, is how we're uplifting our customers landing? Could we do more, right? Do we need to do more? Do we need to do less? As our starting point, right? And we might say, we're going to do 10% for our customers, and that might not land, right? But if you imagine, as inflation rates have gone, the ability to not do 3% or 5%, being locked into that, it's super important. So work really hard to get flexible price increase language in your terms and conditions so that you can do that, and you can, because I guarantee you, again, this is a place where you can look really great in front of your CFOs, your executive team, your board. Where you drive price increase really matters. So you want the terms and conditions that allow you to do that. And then also having reinstatement fee language in your contract is helpful for your linearity. You have the complete autonomy, of course, to not charge that, but to say it's 10% reinstatement fee if you go out of contract is a nice thing to have and be able to leverage for, you know, somewhat belligerent teams that don't get things done on time, right? You want to have some teeth, so you need to make sure teeth are there. And if you can, you just put it there. And then you just have another tactic in your toolbox to help you get it done. I will tell you, I have maybe twice in my entire career actually applied the reinstatement fee to them. It is not something you want to do, but it definitely helps your cause. All right. Another thing is defining within your organization your no negotiation threshold. So understand where to put your time and energy, and make sure that your renewals teams, your customer success teams, whoever's doing them, just have a standard. And really, you would define this in your business at whatever threshold. But for us here, it's $10,000 or $25,000. We do not negotiate terms and conditions on our contracts for any customers below 25K. Yes, of course, we have an exception process. But if a customer wants to negotiate their terms and conditions, it's just a hard stop no. It saves a lot of time in your legal, from your legal people who really need to spend their time on your larger deals, need to spend their time elsewhere. Setting no negotiation thresholds on both the sales side and the renewal side is a very good discipline to have. And it's important to revisit that threshold at all times, right? So come together every 6 months or a year to say, it's an internal business rule, right? Could we move it from 25K to 50K? The higher up you move it and the more disciplined you are to that, the better off and more time that you're saving across many cross-functional teams. And that just means they are more available where you need them. So very good policy to have. I highly suggest, based on the churn analysis and steering that you'll need to do, that you do have unified risk and win reasons. So talk to product, services, support, sales on ultimately when we win a deal, when we lose a deal, you need to be able to point out why we won and why we lost. And it needs to be clear enough that you can action and steer from it. So you'll save yourself a heck of a lot of time by getting that clear institution of those reasons within your CRM or your system, and then driving a discipline in ensuring that you're really clear on what those are when you win and lose a deal. I have, I say one, unless ask me, I've spent a freaking lot of time here, but it's very important. Part of my role is not just to hit our numbers, but also to provide transparency to the rest of the world around where we're losing, and also why we're strong, right? Where are we weak? Where are we strong? And I need to be able to do that and I've been able to do that by being really, really clear about the reasons. You don't want 50 reasons, but you also need them to be comprehensive enough that it's not just like product. okay, what about the product, right? Is it operational quality of the product? Is it product integrations? It needs to be comprehensive, but not exhaustive. So there's a fine line there, and I have a pretty good working list. If anyone wants it, feel free to reach out to me. And then,
Whitney, if
yeah,
I can just double click on that for a second, I think that's hugely important. The reason codes, both on what's going well and what's not. You mentioned product. Maybe there's a subcategory within product, and maybe that's where you do list 10 to 12 to 14 features or things that they wish they had. What are some other buckets as far as, outside of product that, accounts might be at risk or accounts might be churning?
yeah. So I have a few ways I want to go with that. So I want to come back to what I call our revenue at risk playbook, because it's super important that when you identify risk, right? So not just that you capture the reason at the end of the deal on why you lost, but that as you're identifying health in your customer, that you identify risk. So for example, we have risk reasons that align to our churn/win reasons. And they're the exact same, but so it's someone might go in there, a CSM might go in and assess the health and say, we have a services/implementation issue. And that means that something went really wrong in the implementation. And behind that, we've built out plays, right? So the second we register that risk, we say, it's cool. So we raised the flag. Now, what are we interorganizationally going to do to remedy that? So and maybe you don't, and that ends up being the reason they churn, but you want to build out a program that allows your teams to take action off the insight, which is why it needs to be so comprehensive. Support. So within services, I usually have a services, like here, Netwrix implementation, services, third-party implementation, right? I want to know, do we work with partners where we have an implementation problem or something? And then sales is things like there's a couple things that I put into that bucket, but I put them with a header to say product and then kind of sub reasons. So then it's like, this is a product responsibility to resolve. And then these are the reasons within that, that product can go action off. Services, it's implementation, third party. Support, it's typically just support quality, things like that. But on sales side, there's things like training and enablement, which is the customer feels, and then we have a whole play on that. Or it's lack of value realization. So it's just like they don't see the value in our tool. Very scary. I hate it when I see that reason, but
Yeah.
that's a big problem. We also have things like customer capability, meaning they're just like, we don't have the people here to support the product. So we need help. We need, so we kind of, all of those things on the sales side are all, and the sales side too, it says things, it's things like economic distress or mergers and acquisitions. So these are plays that the sales team runs when we run into risk around like, oh, well, we're getting acquired by this company, right? The play there is multiple things, but it's indexing on something a sales team would run, right? It's not a product issue. It's not a support issue. It's a commercial issue. So the key there is to break down and look at it like, cool, I've identified a reason. And is it clear what action I would take against that reason? If it's not, you should really question your reason, right?
Yeah.
So
So this is really resonating with the audience, and yeah, maybe in our follow up on the recording, folks are really wanting to compare and contrast some of the reason codes you've seen with their list. But overall, it feels like you can kind of categorize them into life cycle stages, which is sales side stuff, implementation side stuff, support side stuff, but also market volatility. So hopefully that gives the audience some ideas on different influencers on the customer, different life cycle, different market conditions, and yeah, we can definitely share some of that later in the follow up.
yeah, cool. I'm glad it resonates. I spend an extraordinary amount of my time here because, like I said, it's my responsibility as a business owner to not just report the rate and hit a number, but to provide cross-functional visibility into where we need improvement. Do we need more product innovation? Is there a specific feature that all that everybody wants that we don't have, not even on the roadmap, right? There's just so much stuff. But I'll wrap that out by just saying another important part is, like, especially in the customer success renewal space, everything is changing all of the time. And so if you are able upfront or along the way to really advocate hard for true dedicated enablement resources for your team, it's just very important, right? I was very fortunate to build up sort of an enablement squad in my prior life. Now I have a much slimmer enablement squad, right? So my folks have to rely a lot on peer power, talking to their peers, right? But there's not a more of space, in my opinion, that moves more than ours, and things change all of the time. So be disciplined to making sure that, if you're starting a new role or you're coming into a role or you can advocate for something, like go talk to your enablement. If you have an enablement organization, try to get somebody aligned to you, if not more, that can run can set that up for you, right? Because it's just so many things are changing all of the time, and your ability to keep your team understanding your North Star is, and what you need them to get done that month, that quarter, is just critically important and should never be underestimated. Because at the end of the day, they need to feel like they have the tools that they need. And I haven't ever had a team that wasn't like, oh, I could use more of this. Everyone wants to do a great job. We need to help them do that. So that kind of wraps it out. The way that I broke it down, like I said, is it's just number one, invest in your people, please. It sounds so crazy, but so simple. And number two, align on your institutional, your organizational performance measures, right? What are you as a company going to measure, and how are you going to do that? That's important. Business rules are important, right? Like making sure that you have very clear rules around, well, what if we have a renewal and we swap out a product at renewal for a new one? Is that renewal money or is that new business money? Right? You need to understand and agree on those business rules up front that feed all your performance measures. And then your processes will drive your performance. So these are just some of the ones that I know will make life easier if you can get them put in place. And they're things you can do from, like, no matter where you're at in the journey of building your organization or building up for better. So with that being said, I mean, I think that's it.
That's awesome. Yeah, we do have a couple questions, and I have some follow-ups. Someone is asking, to your point on enablement, wanting to know kind of what you've seen as an ideal setup across the organization. Do enablement folks, support all functions, sales, post-sales support? What's your ideal setup there? Or would you advise to have enablement specialists doing only sales, only customer success and support? What have you seen there?
I think that it's good to have an enablement organization should be led and managed by someone who is bringing all the teams together so that they're not just running site. One great thing about our enablement lead here is she has sales and post sales, right? So she's constantly like able to say, whoa, what you're doing here is impactful to the process over here. So I think that that team should be very cohesive, constantly talking about maybe the areas they support and have a deep understanding of the support. But you would want to have somebody aligned to your organization, right? To run, like, for me, every 2 weeks, I have what we call a need to know session. It's just an hour. We have that because we have Microsoft Teams, we have channels, all for 2 weeks. We might send out a bunch of, hey, follow this process, right? And it's not okay to let your teams receive only that and then expect that actually lands, right? So you can broadcast it out in Teams, that's fine, but then make sure, for me, my most personal success, and I'm personally handling this now because I'm just in a smaller company, But ideally you would have someone doing all of that, that would bring all those topics that you posted in Teams to a live session that says, great, here's everything that we changed or rolled out or a new process this week. Let's talk about it. Let's make sure you understand it, give you a chance to open your live questions, ask questions. And then also in this world, I'm constantly running negotiation workshops, price increase, objection handling, all those things. And as you can imagine, that is heavy. Like it's a full-time job in many cases. So it's ideally you want to have a enablement team whose people are talking constantly and making sure that this is a cohesive system, but you will want dedicated people if you can.
Yeah, yeah. That's a great response. One other that is top of mind. So, customer success teams, it is what it is, are unfortunately consolidating at the moment. So headcount may not be out there to go get a renewals specialist. What would you advise a VP of success on the call today, or even an individual CSM, on how to work with what they have to be more commercial and successful on renewals without an actual focused role on it at the moment? Are there certain training, certain things you would do to help them utilize their time better? Just curious about your perspective.
Yeah, I guess it depends on where they come from, right? So if you're like a true CSM practitioner and you haven't been heavily indexed in commercials, which is totally fine and makes a lot of sense in many cases, then I think partnering yourself with getting out into the industry, the community, and I could link anybody up. If you send me a note on LinkedIn or whatever, I can link you up with anyone. So it's like getting in touch with a highly commercial renewal manager who does this every day and just having constant conversations with them around, okay, so like this is what came up this week, I don't even know what to do here, right? Part of it's that just connecting yourself, like understanding where you need some guidance, and then supplementing that with someone strong in the industry is a really great way to do that. And it goes both ways, right? So renewal management person may not really understand what to do relative to when a customer comes and says, I see no value in my product. Like that's terrifying, but also there's a way to handle that. I think that it's interesting what's happening out there now, and I know everyone's being asked to do more with less. And I also think that the companies who are really thriving are really buckling down on their post-sale organizations and understanding that they need to keep the customers that they have. And so I have a lot of presentations, like if you guys need help substantiating the cause, right? Like why shouldn't you get rid of my renewal managers or my CS? If you're running into any of that, like I'm happy to share help with that, right? Like,
Yeah.
and I have to think about it, but if I was like, I think it's a hard question because it's very specific, but if you had a team that wasn't commercial, I have some really good commercial trainings that are out there that they could take to just help them. I have very good peer connections that I could say, hey, have this person come talk to your whole team. Like they're excellent, and these people will come do that for you, right? Like if now more than ever, I guess as a community, we have to get through the things together.
And maybe for those teams who do have, budget for an extra head or two, what is a typical background of a renewals specific post sale, customer success? Is it an ex salesperson? Is it a CSM who just thrived in renewals? If you were to hire a renewals person today, what does that background look like? Is there an answer? Does it depend? I'd love your
Yeah,
perspective.
I have two answers. So my career before I went into post sale was I was an AE, right? So I come from sales, and I was tired of the hunt. Okay, so I was but you really have to be ready. You have to be ready to make that shift, right? So I was done with like I was, not to say you can't make a lot of money in customer success, but I was done with hitting my W-2 out of the park by hunting. I was just done with that life. So I came into post sales ready for that and understanding that it's different, but also you still get that. What I really like, that sort of, I like winning deals. I like that. So So I think that great renewal managers and CSMs come with a sales background, yes. But I have also hired renewal managers that had zero, basically were that had no experience in it, but were just good at executing whatever that may have been, right? They were just good business executors, and they were curiosity-led human beings. So they're just the type of people that are going to go figure it out no matter what. So now when I hire personally, that is my first and number one requirement. Just like I try to suss out in the interview, essentially, are they curious people? Because if they are, then they will figure it out. And some of the most it's funny, I just had a meeting yesterday. All the CSMs had to do sort of a pitch of our company's statement and or our kind of elevator pitch thing, right? And which made them nervous, but they did awesome. And one of the CSMs we hired, zero experience, right? We didn't have a lot of money to go out and get the best of the best of the best. And he was the best one, like the best delivered pitch yesterday, understanding it just goes to show that if someone wants to figure it out, they will. So I hire for that first. I do think when setting up a renewals function is not to be known as an administrative function. These are not people who just create quotes. You want to understand, you want to hire people that can negotiate or have the grit in them to do that. So I'm not a fan, and this is hit me up if you want to talk through it. I'm not a fan of creating renewal processors. Like, I'm not a fan of that. Yes, it's difficult to navigate the system, but that's not giving you the lift you need on the other parts of the organization. You need someone in there who can truly navigate the customer's negotiation landscape and be a pair to the business procurement. So what normally happens is the business side brings in their procurement side at the customer, and the renewal manager and the procurement person are who go hand in hand together. So anyway, that was a long question. I think it depends, but a lot of my team came from sales backgrounds, but also I've had some successful ones that didn't.
I love that activity. Maybe the folks on the call can use this, where it's like maybe you've got 2 or 3 CSMs, 4 or 5, and it could be shuffling one of those into a full renewals. Why not? Yeah, give them the opportunity to pitch the product and kind of suss out those skills. I think that's an awesome activity to do and kind of see who gravitates towards that naturally. Really cool idea. Really quick follow up from the audience here on kind of renewals. Someone's asking about approvals and kind of delegation of authority when in that renewals process question, if there are price, who has authority on price changes versus add-ons versus product swaps? How much do you delegate to that renewals manager versus what's the line of chain to get those things done without adding a ton of administrative work?
Yeah, so I always give I want a renewal manager or CSM or any in my organization to feel like they have the ability to empower themselves to make decisions. So I'll almost all like price increase, for example, I'll say we lead with 10%, and on a multi-year deal, you have the autonomy to go down to this. This is the floor for you. On a 3-year, on a 1-year. I want them to have their own, thing. And I don't want to bottleneck or get in the way of any of that. And I have no system enabled approvals to when they do, right? Like that's their playhouse. Then I do
Yeah,
have,
and Whitney,
yeah.
real quick on those brackets, how much of that is the VP's authority versus, hey, we're meeting with finance and FP&A and the CFO are telling us this is our authority? Do you see that, or what do you advise there?
So I would say it's probably a little bit of, it's going to depend. My CFO knows that I would probably say no more than yes. So he has given the full reins to me, right? That doesn't mean that you're not trusted if your CFO wants to have an approval, but I usually have a business floor. So I give my team, basically I have a business floor and then I have a financial floor in any of those models. The financial floor typically comes with a system approval. The business floor comes with they have their window of whatever they can do. And then below that, they have to get my approval, but it's not instituted in the system, my approval or my leader's approval, right? Like I would delegate most of my leaders and I don't want to get in the way of that. And so, and then here, right, like we don't have a financial floor because we just don't, meaning we just don't approve anything other than that. But we are starting to turn on system-based approach just because we want to be able to track more and report on specifically price increase. Like, okay, when we got 2%, why did we get 2%? Is that like, we want to be able to better understand why we're giving away profitability, because that's what you're giving away. So for that reason, then we're enabling some of that, but it's so important, as you guys know, especially when you're in a high volume business and you have customers behind you, like you got to be really careful how many hurdles you put in the way while still maintaining structure. So I work very hard only to have like one system-based approval if I can, and in many cases none. So it really just depends. It really depends.
Awesome. One more kind of day-to-day practical tip here from the audience, talking about removing administrative barriers on the renewals process. Someone's asking about overhauling their CRM to be a little more expedited or renewals friendly, whether it's sales stages or renewal stages. Do you have any experience there trying to not, bog
Yeah.
down an internal team going through all these stages? What would you recommend from a CRM perspective, perhaps?
Oh gosh. Where do we begin? First, I'll just say I can relate, and this is a pain you will forever, like, this is just something will forever be on your radar, right? So for me, I wake up every day and I talk with my CS ops team, which is not a lot of people, but my operations team all the time. And I'm like, if 80% of my team's time needs to be in front of customers and 20% needs to be internally on the tools. I have never worked in an organization where that was actually the case, but that's what I aspire every day to get to, which means things like removing approval layers, which means things like develop, basically a day in the life. I have done many, many times a day in the life with my renewal manager, whatever, to understand what are the things that take the most time. And then each quarter, it's like one big rock. We go work on the development or who knows what it is, but this is process efficiency. And when I talk about the people, like, people don't want to hit their head against the wall every day when they come to work. So I take it super serious. Like, what is the one thing that is taking you the most time in the system, or maybe it's a process, right? And we go through a day in the life with that team, that org, that role, and we're like, all right, we're not going to be able to make everything better overnight, but it sounds like this one thing is very annoying for you and takes up a lot of time. We're going to put all of our energy into solving that with you potentially as our business expert. So I try to do that because you can get really, really lost in trying to resolve it all through the whole renewal quoting CRM process, right? So getting very, very clear on what is that thing that's taking the most time, and then putting everything else aside and just fixing that one big rock, right? And it takes so much intentional practice because it's so easy to get distracted and all things, and then continually coming back to the team and being like, this is the big rock, guys, and this is what we're seeing, this is the progress we're making, we're going to make this better for you, right? That's what I suggest. And also I would say acceptance that it's never going to be the easiest thing in the world will go a long way because with you, but diligence to the fact that you should try every day with your ops team, if you have one, hopefully you do, is so super important to the morale of your team, right? Because especially, like, so I would say today, I remember a time when, this is so crazy to me, but it would take 4 hours to create a quote. And like, this is mind blowing, right? And my team today, I would say, is probably on a split of like 60-40, 60% but this is not great. So it's like, what's that 40%? What does that consist of? What's the big rock? Go handle it. And if any of you have specific things that get in your way, like unfortunately, you know, unfortunately, it's not the right word, but we use Salesforce here. At SAP, they build everything, so we use their own internal CRM, but and Oracle the same, but the Salesforce has a lot of capabilities, right? I think it's on us in the industry to be like, if you are using Salesforce or HubSpot or some of these things, right, to connect and be like, how are you doing this process, right? Because I have spent a lot of time at like trimming the fat of these processes and developing them with developers, you know. But if you have kind of like a example of how it should work, it goes a lot easier with your dev teams, which I hate how much I know about that now, but it was so important for my team. So happy to help there if I
Yeah,
can.
I love that. The one big rock that you can get rid of this month, this quarter. Really great advice. Well, we are at time, Whitney. This has been phenomenal. For the audience, we will share these slides and a couple follow-up points, and of course, reach out to us or Whitney with additional thoughts, insights, questions. Really great session today, all about renewals. Whitney, thanks for your time, and for the
But
rest of you, we'll look forward to connecting.
yep, thanks everyone. Take care. Happy
All right,
holiday. Cheers.
have a good one. Bye.